Welcome to the Water Entrepreneur Podcast. This program features a series of interviews exploring the origin stories of startup founders, early adopters, and innovation champions related to their personal, technical, business, organizational, and financial journeys. This podcast is sponsored by ASTERRA, the leader in remote Earth observation technology for the water industry. Support is also supplied by Imagine H2O, envisioning and building solutions with the world's best water entrepreneurs, and Aquarius Spectrum, providing advanced fixed-base leak detection solutions to the water utility business. And now, live from beautiful downtown Encinitas, your host, Paul Gagliardo. Welcome and thanks for joining me today. This is episode 33 of the Water Entrepreneur Podcast, and I'm your host, Paul Gagliardo. And today, I've got some interesting guests, two members of the ASTERRA team, Bruno Toom, the North American Sales Manager, and Faz Nazarifar, our Customer Success Manager. And ASTERRA uses satellite-based radar to detect leaks in underground water pipes. I've spoken to their founder. He was actually, Loren was guest number one on the show. So we'll be talking to Bruno about voice of the customer, and Faz will tell us a little bit about some stories from the field. So Bruno, Faz, thanks for appearing on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having us, Paul. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul.
Worse.
Pleasure to be here.
We'll see if you guys get more listens than your boss does. He'll be unhappy about that, but we'll kind of see how that goes. So before we get into the details and the technology second, I wanted to ask how you guys 2 years in the pandemic altered your way of doing business. How did that kind of impact how you guys worked?
Absolutely. I can answer that one from the sales perspective. It definitely impacted how I work quite significantly. What it really showed me is the power of being face-to-face. And it actually continues into how we are now today, post-pandemic. Should I say post-pandemic? I guess COVID still exists, but it did really change the way we do business, moving from being up and personal, shaking hands, getting the understanding from the customer right then and there, face to face, versus hopping on a Zoom call like we're on right now. These customers really, and when, you got to think of also someone coming in from sales. I'm sure these utilities are getting contacted by various companies and various sales reps all the time. Now, the ones that stand out to them are the ones that take the time to actually go and visit them and shake their hand. But with COVID not being able to do that, how do you build that relationship from behind a computer desk or the phone? And it made it very, very challenging. So I kind of had to change my methods quite a bit, try to bring some personality. What I mean by personality is, you can be on a Zoom call and have your background blurred or have a picture back there, but instead opening up to the natural, me sitting at home, maybe showing my cat or my dog and trying to make it funny. That is one way that I was really able to build a really personal relationship with some of our customers during the pandemic. So I don't know if Faz has anything to maybe add to that from the customer's perspective, but from a sales perspective, I really saw the power in trying to bring my life, my personal life, into my work.
Interesting.
CSM perspective, I think that there are several obstacles, like Bruno was touching upon, in terms of building and nurturing that relationship with the customer. I think that using technology, having web meetings is very useful in terms of accommodating a plethora of meetings, because through the lifespan of a project, there are multiple updates that need to take place. And you might hear that. I think the fire alarm is going off in the background. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that. Apologies. but yeah, it does speak to the value of being in person, because when you are on Teams or on Zoom, you're a little bit more aloof, and I think being able to actually sit down with somebody and have a coffee and also see their working space, and also seeing the obstacles that they face at the utility, seeing the size of the utility, how stretched they may or may not be in terms of resources, really getting out there and being able to empathize with what they're dealing with in their current situation to optimize a project. There's a lot of value in being in person.
So ASTERRA's core business is detecting likely leak locations using satellite mounted radar. So this is a little different, or at least it's a two-step process from what utilities are used to. Maybe you can just give us a quick explanation of, how you find or how you describe the difference between your offering and traditional methods.
Yeah, I can take that one. So, a lot of it comes down to the efficiency. Typically utilities are using kind of reactive methods of leak detection. That could be comprised of, or generally is comprised of, just receiving calls from the customers once leaks have surfaced. If they are using blind surveys where they're just, going out based perhaps on consequence of failure and things of that nature, these can be very time consuming, especially if they have, thousands of miles of pipe. They end up chasing their tail, essentially. By the time, they've gone 12 months of performing leak detection as their resources see fit, and they've just generated new leaks during that time, and they have to, go all the way back to the start of the system and start over again. So as far as, what we're able to provide, it's a much more efficient method. It's, data driven. It's, satellite directed. So, especially for the leak detectors when they're out in the field, this is much more motivating for them. They actually feel like, they're chasing a lead. They have a guiding light when they're actually looking for leaks out in the field. So, we're able to kind of condense the process for them, finesse it and fine tune it. And it gives them a lot more of a strategy in terms of approaching leak detection.
Yeah, interesting. Hey, Faz, when it comes to attracting customers, what's the primary selling point? Is it value proposition? Is it some of the things that Faz just mentioned? And I think an ancillary question to that, is it hard to find the right person in a utility to talk to? I mean, are there a lot of different, is it somebody in operations? Is it somebody in the back office that's, dealing on the fiscal side? Is it hard to find the right person to talk to get an audience with?
Yeah, I can take that, coming from the sales side. And I know you had two questions in there. Let me start with the first one, which is, how do you sell this and what's the value proposition? The key is finding the value proposition with these guys, because it's not the same for everyone. There are some utilities, for example, the state of Florida, they need to be somewhere around below 10% or 12% non-revenue water loss or unaccounted for water loss every year. In Florida, we have many customers that might be above that threshold. We have some that are below that threshold. And I need to find the value of our technology and our offering for both sides, because there really is a value proposition for both sides. For some of those utilities that already have a very low unaccounted for water loss, their, motivation for using a technology like ours might not be to decrease non-revenue water, because they already have low non-revenue water. For them, maybe the value proposition is, well, we want to verify that what we're saying is correct. We want to verify that our system is indeed tight. So we kind of want to use you and hope that maybe you don't find leaks, because that tells us that, hey, we're correct. We don't have as many leaks in our system, versus some of those other utilities that have a higher non-revenue water loss want to use us to find those leaks and decrease non-revenue water loss. So from a sales perspective, my job is to find out, what are you guys doing today, and what is your motivation for potentially using something like this, and guiding them towards that approach, because our technology can be used in a number of different ways, and there is a value for both sides of the business there. So that's how I would answer that. And the second part of the question is it tough to find the right person to talk to? Absolutely. It is very, very difficult. The process usually doesn't start and end with the first person that I reached out to. I usually have to get to 3, 4, 5, 10 people before a decision is made. And it varies also from public to private. Working from a supervisor to no, now I'm talking to the CEO or general manager, versus talking to a utilities manager or an engineer. Working with the utility guys versus the engineering department can look a lot different, or operations for that matter. So there are challenges, and you'll notice that each side has maybe a different motivation for doing what they do. Sometimes I start with an actual leak detector, believe it or not, which usually doesn't make the end decision whether to use us or not, but getting them bought into, hey, using our technology can make your life so much easier. I know today you're having to kind of go around aimlessly. Well, imagine we can get you to a hotspot and make your life a lot easier, starting with them and then getting them bought in so that they can tell their boss, who then tells their boss. So it can be a challenge finding the right person, but ultimately, we get there.
Hey, Foz, from your perspective, after the work's done and you want to talk about success, you're probably not even talking to the same people that Bruno's talking to. You're probably talking to some other people about defining, okay, what was success and was this successful?
Yep, certainly. Yeah, I mean, oftentimes I'll be speaking with a multitude of different people. It could be, in some instances, typically an operations manager. Sometimes, during a project summary, they'll bring in individuals from the board who are interested, who are, sort of the highest tier in terms of decision making. And then for some projects, we may have, like a third party engineer who's been brought in to assist with their water loss saving recovery side of things. So there's definitely different, different fields that you're dealing with, different types of people, different personalities. And so I think it's really important to understand who you're speaking to, and how to navigate that conversation appropriately, depending on what information that they're specifically interested in, because it can differ in terms of, specifically what they're interested in. If you're having a board member come in, they're specifically going to be more interested in the executive summary side of the project. They want a concise summation of what were the highlights, what were the findings, what's our ROI. They want that condensed package. They don't want the kind of nitty gritty of the project and getting down to the kind of bare bones of things. So I think that is a great point, Paul, in terms of, honing in on who you're speaking to and, what it is that they're interested in understanding about the project.
Yeah, both you guys have to be able to talk to the field, boots on the ground woman and, the CEO guy. And I'm sure you have to dress differently and wear a different hat when you're talking to all those people, huh?
Yeah. It's the difference between wearing a hoodie and a hard hat, or wearing a suit.
Yeah, I guess I'm more of the suit and tie.
Well, you just got to make sure you dress for success, right?
That's
Exactly.
right. That's right.
So I know that technology is kind of pipe material agnostic, and I also know that it's more difficult to hear leaks on plastic pipe as opposed to metal pipe. Can you talk a little bit about maybe a project you had where, say, it was plastic pipe, and either you had really good success, better than you thought, or you kind of had average success and had to kind of explain that nuance with the customer?
Yeah, I can take that one, Paul. So in terms of specifics, we definitely like to kind of protect the client's confidence in terms of speaking to specific customers. But in terms of PVC, it is an integral component to take into consideration when approaching a project. And this is something that we definitely reinforce with customers in terms of how they're planning on navigating a project, whether they're using internal leak detection or subcontracting leak detection. There can be a misalignment at times of truly appreciating the obstacles that are placed in front of that in terms of how the sounds actually travel. When it comes to plastic piping, whether it's PVC, polyethylene, We do try and help the customer in terms of prioritizing the points of interest, in terms of accommodating for the field investigation. Some other variables that we would also want to look at is perhaps the backfill around the piping itself for the leak detection. That's another important aspect to it. Likelihood of failure is another component that we could use as far as prioritization goes. But when it comes to PVC, it really comes down to the amount of assets that a leak detector can actually listen on in terms of picking up any sound that is present, as well as the pipe diameter itself. So, we may have a customer who gets frustrated because they're saying, perhaps we're not finding leaks in this specific location. And then we look at it and it's, a 24-inch main line that PVC main line they're trying to listen on. So it's kind of like trying to help them navigate their expectations in that specific area to say, okay, well, maybe, acoustic leak detection isn't suitable in that very small specific region. Perhaps you could deploy M-loggers in that area. But for the other areas of the system where you have, 8-inch PVC, 6-inch PVC with plenty of listening points, and as long as the leak detector also has sufficient expertise to know how to navigate those areas, such as using ground miking and correlating appropriately, then we can still achieve, excellent results in those areas despite there being plastic or, soft piping in those areas.
So how critical is training and having, the boots on the ground, the leak detection, and people having the right equipment? Because, maybe some of the internal teams, maybe they're not as equipped or trained as well as a professional contractor who does it for a living. So I'm just wondering, does ASTERRA kind of provide training or recommendations on which equipment to use?
Certainly, yeah. I think looking at several factors to touch on your question, it's first of all, the acoustic equipment itself has a shelf life. So sometimes we may find that utility has acoustic equipment from the early 90s, for example. So at that point, they really need to get new equipment. There are certain vendors they can go directly to in terms of purchasing the equipment. And I think it typically surprises a lot of utilities at the general cost of that. So that's why I personally do recommend just subcontracting, especially if it's for a smaller job. It's kind of, why go and spend, $30,000 on a correlator and $15,000 on, acoustic listening device, and then invest further money into training your field crew. And, again, 5 days of training, will it really be sufficient? Because it goes beyond just knowing how to use the equipment. I think, there's a lot to be said for having that trained ear when it comes to acoustic leak detection. So there are definitely several factors there, including as well, when you're bringing in an outside contractor, they're more driven. That's their full-time job. They're being paid to find leaks. Whereas internally, what I often find is, these guys are already stretched. They're already working on the crews which take care of the repairs, the customer call-outs. They've got several hats they have to wear in a given day. So they can only get to so many points of interest at a given time. They may feel, rushed off their feet. So I do think there is a lot to be said in terms of, having the professional leak detector go and investigate points of interest, investigate and confirm leaks. And, we generally do see a difference in kind of the external leak detectors versus the internal in that regard.
Interesting. Faz, I see from your resume that you were a Division I soccer player. Is that correct?
I think,
Bruno, I'm sorry. I'm going the wrong direction.
I was going to say that if that was my resume, it must have been passed through a few different hands before it got to you.
I'm reading my list here, and it's sorry about that. Bruno.
Yes, sir.
Division I soccer player.
I was in my old life.
So I have one question for you.
Sure.
Who's the GOAT?
Oh man,
Ronaldo or Messi?
that's an easy one. I love how you only gave me two options.
Hey, we're talking current players, okay?
Funny enough, you put my goat in there, and I'm going with Lionel Messi all day.
Okay, I hear you. I even got my wife to watch the World Cup this year, so
Nice.
it's like, it's like, look at that. Do you get it? Do you understand why now? She's like, how did he do that? It's like, don't ask me. It's like I trip over myself, just looking at what he was doing. But anyway,
Just wait, the next World Cup is coming here. I'm pretty excited for that.
yeah, really. Yeah, hopefully you'll have, and it's going to be all over the country too, so it's not going to be all in one place.
That's right. Let me save up my PTO for ASTERRA here.
There you go. I know ASTERRA's been in the business since 2015, something like that. Do you still have to convince potential customers that it works, or are we past that? Or are you past that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I wish we could say we're past that completely at this stage. Unfortunately, we're not. We do work in, and I know you know this, both Paul and Faz, is a pretty conservative market. A lot of these guys and women have been around for a very, very long time. They've been using the same traditional methods that have been around for the last 100 years, and it really hasn't changed too much. There are a lot of new technologies coming out beyond ASTERRA that these engineers are willing to look at. Some utilities, like even DC Water, has a whole innovation department. So utilities like those that are very progressive and looking to bring in a new technology is great for us to come in there and show them what we can do. But ultimately, a lot of utilities still like to hear about a success story in their area or at least in their state. So what we heavily rely on are building those relationships with our customers and building out case studies with them. That's something that is a huge, I guess, selling point or proposition that I like to bring in from the beginning of my conversation with these utilities is, hey, if this is something that you are happy with, are you open to us sharing the results with the public? I think it could help you guys and show the world that you guys are taking initiative. You care about water loss and you care about the dollars and saving taxpayers money. And for us, it's very helpful because we don't only want to help you, we want to help everyone worldwide. And so these utilities and prospects definitely do still want to hear about a success story. And we are heavily working on building out case studies with our customers in various states throughout North America.
So from a success perspective, finding a leak is one thing. To realize the value proposition, you have to fix the leak, right? So that saves you the water, saves you money. Do you guys try to work with the customers to coordinate with the repair team so that fairly quickly after the leak is found, that the repair teams come out and repair the leak so they can realize the benefit, or is that a little bit too deep in the weeds for what you guys do?
Yeah, I can take this one, Paul. So yeah, that really goes back to the CSM role in terms of the success planning of a project. So a lot of it comes down to data management. We'll have some customers who may have multiple services in a year. So this is information that we would then acquire from the customer upfront in terms of what type of resources do you have internally to manage this data? What's the size of your repair team? What's the lead time that they need in terms of actually repairing a leak? And then, towards the conclusion of a project, we'll provide them with, the leak cards for what we do find. We'll also help prioritize the leak, and we'll ensure that there's sufficient time between them finishing their investigation of the points of interest, as well as performing repairs before we provide further data to them. So a lot of that comes down to the success planning of a project, as well as the data management. So that is something that, we do foresee up front, and we do work with the utility to ensure that there's a healthy timeline throughout, and that, they're not falling behind at any stage.
Yeah, I can imagine you could probably overwhelm a utility by saying, okay, here I have 1,000 points of interest. Go to town. And they're like,
Exactly.
I'm one guy.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want from me?
Yeah, exactly. And then you run the risk of them getting, overwhelmed, or, potentially it's kind of like, do utilities want to know about those leaks at that point? That obviously is not good for PR. The public understand you guys knew about, 50 leaks, and you still haven't got to even one of them yet. So it's definitely an important component, and it's a good point to bring up regarding the lifespan of a project.
It's interesting. I talked to one leak detection expert, and that was the issue. One of the issues he brought up was, well, if you identify all these likely leak locations and then there's a main break, people are going to go back to the record and say, hey, you knew about this, you should have fixed it, we're going to sue you. I'm like, oh boy, that's a stretch, but I get it. I understand what you're talking about. But I mean, it was interesting back in the day how many reasons why people would not use the technology, but they would come up with the craziest reasons why. It's like, no, that's okay. I'll pass on this one. I'll just walk the line. It makes my life easier.
Yeah, no, it's definitely understandable, and it's something, again, we have different protocols in place as well, in terms of, obviously we have our UCollect dashboard, which the customer has access to. They can access all of the data from the field in real time, so they can see what's happening. We also have protocols in terms of, the leak detectors who we work with. If a leak is typically more than 10 gallons per minute, we want them to directly call that in to kind of operations at the water utility, so they can send someone out immediately. So we do try and mitigate that as much as possible to make the utility's life easier.
So I can imagine that larger utilities probably have budgets, they have more staff, maybe it's easier for them to move forward with a program like this. Do you see any difference between the small utilities and the big utilities, whether it's decision-making process or funding of the project? Are there? I would just assume that it's easier for the bigger utilities to do it than the smaller ones. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I'm curious as to what your experience is.
Yeah, and this is a CSM slash sort of sales question, I would say. It definitely varies from utility to utility. So sometimes it may be a case of the size of the project for that particular service. So they may say to us, for this project, we need to keep it below X amount of dollars, and that will streamline the process for us internally and make this a lot smoother. If it goes over that, then this has to go to the council for approval, and it could take a considerable amount of time to kind of move things along. So that's the main factor. And then as far as the resource side of things, I see generally that the large utilities, they do have many more resources. As far as funding goes, they have more. They have a higher budget. We see with some of the smaller utilities, they're more dependent on grants or cost sharing programs. We've had quite a few smaller utilities do cost sharing programs where they group together with some of the local utilities, and they kind of share images as far as satellite scans go. So we are kind of amenable to different sized utilities, different needs in that regard. So it does vary across the board in that respect.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, Faz touched on a real important point, especially with the smaller utilities when it comes to cost sharing and grants specifically. And this is a story that I can tell you from a current customer, a very small one called Klein Township Water Authority in Pennsylvania. You can go ahead and look them up when you get a chance, but they're very, very small. They have about roughly 15 linear miles of pipe in a rural area in Pennsylvania. You would envision 15 linear miles of pipe is a very small area. And the data, while it's affordable, sure, could it be a little bit overwhelming for some smaller utilities? Absolutely. But Klein was actually able to procure and purchase our services through a grant. And that grant was published by the SRBC. Don't ask me to pronounce what that is. Maybe Fast knows how to. But they're an awesome company that was able to publish a grant, and Klein was able to apply for that grant and therefore purchase our services. Now you see Klein working with us year over year. And not only that, but you're starting to see other utilities now in the area, whether small, medium, or large, hop on and do the exact same thing now in year 2. So that is one way that some of these small utilities have been able to take advantage of our services, in addition to cost sharing. Like Faz mentioned, these satellite images that we're acquiring capture a very, very large area to where multiple utilities are being captured all at once. So they can all hop in and do a project that way. I've seen it done in a number of different ways versus the larger utilities. Yeah, they have more funding. The process might take longer. From a sales perspective, we're talking more of a lead time of 6 months to even a year. And you got to get in front of their board of their board of directors and present to them and get stamp of approval from the governor. So the process looks a lot different. But ultimately, we're accomplishing the same goal, and everyone's able to utilize our services.
Do you have to sometimes go through a competitive bidding process at all? Is that ever something you guys have to do?
The majority of the time we don't. And the reason why is because we are sole source. We're the only ones capable of doing this. Therefore, the majority of the utilities that we work with are able to procure our services that way. However, we do work with public entities where that can be difficult, and we do still need to go through a competitive bid. And we will do that, absolutely. Now, the challenge is that we are very much complementary to acoustic leak detection, but we're different. And a lot of these bids, they get written for the traditional acoustic method. So it can be very difficult for us to hop in that way. But it's absolutely something that we can do. But going back to what I said earlier, most of the time we don't need to, because we are the only ones doing this.
So I go for a walk every day, and I go behind this grocery store over to a park, and I guess I don't know if it was last winter or maybe last summer. There was just water coming out of this, some kind of vault, kind of run down the street. So I called up and kind of called the leak in, and I'm assuming that's how a lot of leaks are found. There's a work order is generated because somebody calls in a leak. So with the ASTERRA program, I'm assuming that you're identifying a lot of leaks that are not surfacing, that no one would ever have seen before. Is that true? And maybe give me a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, so we are looking for the soil saturation, and that's one of the primary reasons why the majority of the leaks that we do find are subsurface. We'll often kind of have utilities ask, what are the general size of the leaks that you find? Everyone wants to find that kind of big leak. They want to find the white whale. Everyone wants it, right? But at the same time, you could argue those typically would be the more obvious leaks. So the synthetic aperture radar, we use L-band, so it does penetrate up to about 10 feet subsurface. And we are looking for those physical characteristics of potable water. We're looking for that treated water, chlorine, chloramine, fluoride. And so when that's coming into contact with the soil and creating an aberration in that particular area, that's then highlighted as a point of interest. And that is why we generally find that the majority, as long as the data is being utilized in a proactive manner, the majority of the leaks will be subsurface that the leak detectors find.
So what was the biggest leak you guys ever found?
Biggest leak, Bruno, was that thinking? As far as published ones, I'm thinking.
The ones you can talk about.
I'm thinking Hilton Head.
I agree. To my knowledge, it would be Hilton Head. That one was estimated at about 700 to 1,000 gallons per minute. That one affected even multiple utilities in the area. It was huge. Needless to say, that one leak alone paid for their services with us for the next 3 years. So it was a very significant leak. That's published. Encourage anyone to read up on that case study. But yeah, we're talking almost 1,000 gallons per minute is huge.
So how did that one go unnoticed?
That was in a marsh, wasn't it, Bruno?
It
And they
was,
had
it was,
to send
they,
someone in to do some deep sea diving to confirm it, right?
yeah, I wish. I don't believe Faz or I were working for ASTERRA at the time that when that one was found, but he's right. It was a 12-inch, approximately a 12-inch main buried beneath the middle of a tidal marsh. And you could see actually animal footprints coming from this tidal marsh. And we located it as a likely leak location. And so someone said, okay, what's going on over here? And there's animal footprints coming from this tidal marsh. So that triggered someone to go and investigate further. How they found it, the methods they used to actually go and locate that leak, I have no idea. But it is something that we were able to find.
So who's better at pinpointing leaks? Vessel, the leak detection dog, or your contractors?
I don't know that there's enough data on the leak sniffing dogs yet. We've definitely there's a couple of utilities that we've worked with who have used the leak sniffing dog, and I'm still curious about the accuracy of that in terms of the size of the leaks that they could pick up. But I mean, I would love to think that the dogs. I mean, in my ideal world, in my romanticized version of reality, I think, the leak sniffing dog would be where it's at. I think it'd be such an exciting, project to undertake each time, knowing that, you're going out with a golden retriever or, whichever breed that they're using at the time. But, as it stands, as far as data is concerned, I'd probably stick with the leak detector, the human one for now, but still to be seen.
Okay, just checking out. I know that I've seen more and more, human interest story articles, about the dog in Texas, the one in Arkansas, the one in the UK. They seem to be popping up all over the place. So I was kind of just, just curious. How often do utilities allow you to publish data or give presentations or write articles? Is that typical, common, 20% of the time, 70% of the time? How often are they interested in reporting out on their results?
Yeah, they're typically very, very motivated to do so. I'd say that, the majority of customers, in fact, when we do reach out to them and ask if we can, share their results, if we can kind of speak to the success of a project, or even, collaborate in terms of a presentation at a conference, I'd say for the most part, they're very receptive and very enthusiastic about doing so. When we do approach them, obviously we do all the heavy lifting on our end, and then we send everything over to them for final approval. Any kind of momentum that's built from it, or any other ways that we may want to utilize a particular case study, we always go back to the utility to confirm with them that they're comfortable with us doing so. But yeah, for the most part, I would say that they're very receptive to it.
Honestly, Paul, and Faz answered that perfectly the exact same way that I would answer it. But honestly, what I've been noticing too is that utilities want to help other utilities. They're not selfish in, this worked for us, so let's just keep it for us. No, they, when it works for them, they want to share it with the world. They want to share it with everyone. We all care about water. Even myself as a sales manager, I care about saving water. And if I care about it, these guys care about it even more. So, I'll find very often that they want to share it with everyone. They want to share it with their neighbors, who then want to share it with their neighbors, and word spreads like wildfire. So, I very much noticed that they're receptive to the publication because they want everyone to know about it.
But when you do presentations like at a conference, are you still finding that, on the exhibit floor, people are coming by the booth and you still making contacts in that kind of old school kind of way? Is that still working?
It does still work. You'll notice me out at these conferences, specifically. We actually have our West Coast sales manager at a conference right now with a booth in San Diego, California. You'll notice me traveling the East and going to these conferences and setting up a booth. It does work. We need to show our presence out there along with all of the other vendors and technologies that are out there doing the same. We want to be known as an industry leader. We want to make sure that everyone is aware that we're here, we exist, we can help you. We're very much complementary to some of these other companies and guys that you see around, so you can use us while you're using them. At the end of the day, shaking hands, letting them see me in the suit and tie. It's very, very helpful. So yes, it does still work. You'll definitely see us out there at conferences with a booth all the time.
Great. Yeah, I was actually just at that conference in San Diego doing some live podcasting. So it was my first time attending a conference and doing recordings and stuff. So you will actually see one of your compatriots being interviewed by me.
Wow.
I think tomorrow, but we'll see. But by the time this airs, it'll be a month ago. But yeah,
You know what, Paul? Next time you do that, make sure you bring one of those leak detection dogs with you. You'll get a whole lot of people.
yeah, you got a lot of attention. You got a lot of attention. So, on this show, we spend a lot of time talking to founders of company about the big picture, but it all comes down to execution to make a successful company, and marketing and selling the product and customer success analysis is really, really key. And these two guys show you how it's done. And I really appreciate you guys being on the show today, and I wish you all the best of luck. And make sure you get your nice suit and your nice hoodie and hard hat all shined up for the next trip out in the field. So again, I want to thank you guys. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Really appreciate this. This is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. This podcast was brought to you by ASTERRA, with additional support from Imagine H2O and Aquarius Spectrum. The producer is Anna Gagliardo. Theme music by Gabriella Gagliardo. Yes, this is a family affair. Your host is Paul Gagliardo. If you have any questions about this podcast or the series, please contact us at thewaterentrepreneur@gmail.com. And please follow us on Instagram. We hope to see you all again next time.